In the 1950s, only 5% of black smokers used menthols. After 4 generations of industry targeting, almost 90% of black smokers used menthols. And again, this just speaks to the fact that the tobacco companies have aggressively and intentionally targeted communities of color, black communities, all across the United States. And that actually is one reason why there are so many more deaths from cancers, cardiac heart disease that we see in black communities compared to other communities. And there needs to be legislation and regulation with respect to the targeting of black communities. Actually, there is research in the medical literature clearly indicates that African Americans, on average, start smoking about 3 years later in life than their white counterparts. However, the science and the research also shows that when African Americans do smoke, it's more difficult for them to quit smoking because in many respects, it's more addictive. The tobacco products that the tobacco companies target to these black communities are more caustic, they're more carcinogenic, and they're more addictive as well.
Tobacco use is an independent risk factor for heart disease linked to 1/3 of all heart disease deaths. Yeah, it's funny they don't show us the real parts of tobacco use. They paint a pretty picture and they sell it to us. And they sell it to us young, but they don't show us what happens when we get old, right? And what that looks like and what we look like using these things for so many years. It's crazy to think that it's easy to sell and get kids and youth and young people hooked without really telling us how that's going to change our lives, because we don't know what we don't know, but they know. As people of color, as Latinos, as black people, we have not been told to think about our long-term health or our lives as a whole. We're always so short-sighted because I think a lot of these spaces and systems that we navigate have told us that we're not going to live long lives, but I think it's up to us to really make a change and pursue this work to transform our lives. And sometimes it is through policy, and sometimes it is for us to take and make a change. We don't think about our long-term health and the health of our communities as a whole. We're so isolated, and we think about this as a single person issue when this impacts our communities and how long we live and how fruitful our lives can be.
The more black children who live near a store, the more likely it is that menthol tobacco products will be advertised near candy displays. The first thing that comes to my mind when I was a kid, there were those candy cigarettes. And to be honest, that made us feel cool because it was something the adults could do. We would get the candy cigarettes. I feel like it had the powdered sugar too to give you the smoke. But I never realized how that creates a pipeline, right? So you start as a kid, you think you look cool doing this. You turn 18, now you start doing these cigarettes. I always tell people control the controllables. This is a controllable that you can control. These big companies want to target people that look like me to shorten our lives. And life is so precious. It's so precious. And to spend money, essentially to end somebody's life, is crazy to me.
It honestly reminds me of one of my family reunions. I'm sorry, my mom passed from COPD. So, when I look at this, it reminds me of my mom. And I know smoking was the number one cause of her suffering in her final years of life. You know, to the point she had to be intubated. And so, yeah, it reminds me of one of our family reunions. This black lady, quite honestly, reminds me of my mom. And these black men remind me of my dad, who also was a smoker. And I think it's horrible. I don't think these companies realize that it's actual people, community of people that have died. They didn't see my mom suffer for her last days or suffer just to get oxygen in her lungs. And quite honestly, if they did see it, I don't think that they would care about it because it's all for $1. And to them, my mom is not worth more than $1. Learn more at clevelandenstargeting.org.